All right, Jonny, chapter 7, sustaining bridge selling momentum and long-term wins. So this is where you start talking about this idea of the bridge cadence, and you introduce that concept in this chapter. And for teams who have never had a rhythm of coaching and scoring, what does a healthy cadence of that look like in practice?
A healthy cadence can be different for different companies. So for sure, you want to pick something you're doing weekly, you want to pick something you're doing monthly, and something you're doing quarterly. More than, I think there's a lot of data out there that says beyond quarterly, it's not always pointless to institute rhythms beyond that because the brain thinks a quarter at a time. Yeah. And so we think of what are you going to do weekly, monthly, and quarterly, and then think through what's sustainable. So do what's sustainable for you depending on the size of your team and what the makeup of your organization. We've had people where they bring someone in and basically their whole job is just to install the bridge and create that cadence, and all they're thinking of is the bridge, right? But not everyone has that luxury. Sometimes you might be a director of sales or a manager that has a lot on your plate. And so be thinking just what are those things in our regular touch points that we can weave the bridge into? And most importantly, if you come up with a plan for implementation in your bridge cadence, ask yourself, is this something that's sustainable that I can commit to for the long haul? The baseline bridge score assessment of listening to all those calls, the reason that's a heavy lift for a short sprint is because it's not necessarily sustainable to do that all day, every day. But going forward, you want to be thinking, what can I sustain?
Yeah. Jonny, how does the size of the team and their volume of leads impact how they think about their bridge cadence?
So the things you want to think about are how big is my team and how many leads do I have coming in, like you just said. If you're over 25 or 30 reps, it's going to be hard to install a bridge cadence where you're really honed in and have 100% visibility on each and every rep. So you want to be thinking about how can I set up my bridge cadence in a way where everyone is being held accountable. I'm getting the most, as many scores as possible, whether we're implementing some form of self-scoring or we're utilizing tech. Someone who's in that situation with very little downtime on their team and a large team is going to approach it differently than someone who maybe is managing 3 reps and the lead flow is not quite where you want it. And where my mind goes is let's use that example of you're just managing a couple of reps, or maybe you have a large team where each leader only has a couple of reps. The fewer the reps you have and the fewer your lead flow, the lower your lead flow is, you want 100% visibility. So if it's possible to get 100% visibility on each call and each conversation being scored, you want to lean in that direction. But if you have a larger team, higher lead flow, you're going to want to think through ways that are a little bit more scalable, and maybe you get creative with implementing coaching and training so that you're not having to listen to a bunch of calls. You might do some self-scoring instead of listening to the calls yourself. But a lot of that's just dependent on the size of your team and lead flow.
Yeah. So one of the things you emphasize, Jonny, is that revenue is a lagging indicator. And if we're viewing it that way, how does that mindset shift change the way a leader approaches coaching, accountability, and performance reviews with their team?
In my eyes, this gets a lot simpler when you start to think through how am I coaching, training, leading, strategizing as a sales leader with my team. If you're focused on the lag measures like revenue, like close rate, like pipeline values and all these things, those are great. Like those have their place. But why not just start where it all stems from? And so I'm thinking through the mindset shift of rather than looking backwards and saying, what could we do to go back or change something? The real shift is we're always looking forward. And it's not that we're not looking back in some ways, but we're always looking forward to how can we just be great in our conversations. And so it's a more scalable effect where instead of looking back deal to deal and saying, what could we do here to move this forward? It's instead saying, how can we just become better at every conversation because we're approaching it the right way, and that's more scalable. And so you'll have those moments where you need to look back and you need to get creative and all the things stay the same in some regard, but it's really the mindset shift of, hey, as a leader, 90% of my efforts is just going to making people really good at the conversation. And that's really as simple as it is.
Yeah. And it'll have a domino effect into all of the other things. Now, some leaders, they fear being viewed as micromanagers, especially if they're enforcing any kind of call scoring, weekly coaching, that sort of rhythm, and even bridge cadence. How do you recommend that they position the bridge so it feels empowering to the rep and it doesn't feel like something that's being used to control them?
Well, during the writing of this book, I interviewed a ton of sales leaders. And one of the questions that I asked every single one was, when you hear the term sales call scoring, what comes to mind? And I got all sorts of answers. Lead scoring, or, lead scoring to a measuring stick, to all this stuff. And almost all of them were negative, right? Because when people think of call scoring and scoring, we all have a bad memory of a manager or a boss or a coach or a leader or someone in our life who is constantly scoring and assessing us. And we were afraid of our every little move because it might not live up to that standard. And while the Bridge, you're installing a standard and you're making a decision for, this is how we're going to go about things in our organization, you don't want to micromanage and use it as a tool for that. So the way I think about this is, with the Bridge score and our coaching and our training, we are looking for trends over a bigger sample size than just one call. Now, reviewing one call or coaching off one call and doing things off one call can be valuable for the rep. But the most important and most valuable thought with the Bridge score is, what can you do to coach off of 10 calls, or coach off of 100 calls, or coach off 1,000 calls, so that your training, it's based off trends in a way that's helpful. It's not saying, hey, here's one little thing that went wrong on one call and I'm gonna bring it up every single time. There's a big difference. And so I do think the beautiful part about the Bridge score is, as the leader, you actually can take a deep breath and maybe not micromanage as hard, because now you know, I have a tool to look at the macro level, which is 10, 100, 1,000 calls rather than one. So we're looking at trends instead of the micro.
When we think about adoption, technology is going to come to mind for some folks. So when it comes to technology, though, you're really clear that the tool doesn't create adoption, right? It's good strategy and leadership is what's going to create the adoption within a company. So what mistakes do companies make when they over-rely on tech instead of starting with strategy and leadership before moving into using tech?
Well, I think of a few different examples where some of our bigger case studies and results have come from organizations with next to zero tech stack, like large companies with 7-figure marketing budgets and large sales teams with quite, abysmal tech stacks, right? Like, it would blow your mind, the type of stuff that you see sometimes in these organizations. And it's so beautiful because it's like, oh, this organization had nothing, and they had even their CRM was rough, and all these different things. But because they focused on the framework, and because their leaders were bought in on, hey, we're going to control what we can control, which is the conversations we're having and the approach we take to it. That will, I think we can often look to our companies and say, well, what can we leverage from a tech standpoint to get better? And all of those things are great, but you can have success without those things just by having the right philosophy and approach and leadership and coaching and training. The key is, make the tech work for you. So regardless of what you use for conversation intelligence or scoring, you don't want to rely on the out-of-the-box scoring formulas all the time, even if they're using a trusted methodology, because that trusted methodology in general is not the same as applying that for your organization. And so you'll talk to companies all the time, you say, oh yeah, we use this tool and it's scoring with that framework. And what you're doing in that case is you're working for the tech, or you're changing your approach because of an out-of-the-box tech feature. You want to get in the position where, no, we know our Bridge framework, we know our Bridge score, and whatever tech we're using, we are going to make that tech work for us. And so we're going to utilize it in a way where the data and the scoring it gives us aligns with what we want to do. We're not going to be flimsy and tweak with the various bells and whistles that tech has to offer.
Yeah, that's perfect. It's such a good thing to remember, because there is no shortage of tech available to us, and we have to get to the point where tech is the tool, but we are the ones who are driving and using the tool, and not the other way around. So,
and a closing thought on this would be thinking through the different times we've tried to set up different techs with clients to score accurately. You could put the best scoring parameters inside of a very established and popular conversation intelligence tool, and the score it spits out to you at the end is entirely different than what you would score it if you were doing it, or even if your rep was self-scoring. And so one of the points I always like to make with scoring is going back to the basics. And even if you have all of your reps on a spreadsheet, or a worksheet or a tracker of some kind, when a call ends, do a quick self-score. You're probably gonna get better insights to what's actually happening. And if you have no fancy tech, that alone via spreadsheets or listening to simple recordings is gonna give you so much visibility into what's happening in the conversation. So make the framework work for you and make it work for the tech, not the other way around.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's fantastic. So as we finish out chapter 7 and then head into chapter 8, we're going to talk about why a framework alone is not going to fix your sales calls, and we'll dive in a little deeper. See you there.
Okay.